Hi, I'm James Whitmore. Together, we're stepping out of the present and into history itself. Walk with me through the cities, streets, and moments that shaped our world. This is James Reconstructs History.
At the start of the year 1600, Paris was a far cry from the elegant, glowing city of light we know today. Close your eyes and imagine yourself at the beginning of the 17th century, on the banks of the Seine River. The first thing you smell is the heavy odor of narrow streets without sewers, the dampness of the river, and the smoke from wood fires burned by thousands. At that time, Paris was a narrow, dark, and disorganized labyrinth left over from the Middle Ages. However, this century would change not only the physical appearance of Paris, but also the cultural and political genetics of Europe. Henry IV, the good king, who sat on the throne at the beginning of the century, looked at Paris with a vision. For him, Paris was not just a place of residence, but a massive monument representing the power of the state, the way to unify a France that had just emerged from the destruction of religious wars was to rebuild Paris. In this period, the first thing you encountered when entering Paris was not chaos, but a search for order. The dignified and symmetrical understanding we call French classicism began to rise over these muddy streets. Paris was preparing to become the capital of the great century, Grand Siècle, leaving behind the remnants of the Middle Ages. Henry IV's first major signature on Paris was the Place des Vosges. This was Paris's first planned square. Imagine every building built with the same height, the same red brick and gray stone, and the same symmetry. This was a discipline Paris had not witnessed until then. The nobles walking under the arcades of the square could now socialize not only in safety, but also in aesthetic harmony. Right after, Pont Neuf, the new bridge, changed the fate of the city. In that period, bridges were dark and narrow passages with houses built upon them. However, Pont Neuf was the first bridge to contain no structures on it. It was wide, allowed you to watch the river, and everyone crossing it could see the broad panorama of Paris. The bridge became Paris's social center. Actors performed their plays here, vendors set up stalls, and aristocrats and beggars walked on the same pavement. This bridge was the first great platform of modern urbanism, the windpipe of Paris. Architecture was no longer just for shelter, but a tool to live the city and display the kingdom's splendor. By the mid-1600s, the color of politics changed. After the assassination of Henry IV, the legendary Cardinal Richelieu took the stage. Richelieu's vision was simple, but its implementation was ruthless: to make the king the absolute authority and France the center of Europe. During the Richelieu period, Paris became the heart of a state bureaucracy. The power in the castles of the nobles began to be drawn towards the palaces in Paris, especially the Louvre. However, this transition to central authority was not easy. While Louis XIV was still a child, the people of Paris and the nobles entered into a great rebellion called the Fronde. Between 1648 and 1653, the streets of Paris were filled with barricades. The royal family was forced to flee the city. This event created a deep trauma in the mind of the young king. Seeing the anger of the Paris street, Louis XIV would later decide to distance himself from the city and move his power to Versailles. But before leaving, he launched massive projects to make Paris a controllable space. Politics was now the art of creating a society of spectacle. The king had the old city walls of Paris demolished and opened wide walking paths in their place, which we call boulevards today. The city walls were no longer protected by the king's army. The king's authority itself had become a shield protecting the city. Two different worlds lived side by side in 1600s Paris. On one side were the salons organized by aristocratic women in their homes. In these palace-like houses in the Marais district, the most elegant form of language was spoken, philosophy was practiced, and Molière's plays were discussed. These salons were the places where French culture and elegance, politesse, were born. Here, clothes were made of silk, shoes had heels, and every movement was bound by strict rules of etiquette. On the other hand, just a few streets away was a completely different reality, Cour des Miracles, or Court of Miracles. This was the underground world of Paris. It was given this name because crippled people who begged during the day were said to miraculously heal when they returned to this neighborhood at night. It was a refuge for thieves, the homeless, and thousands of people excluded by society. Paris was the most crowded city in Europe at this time, and misery lay in ambush right in the shadow of glittering palaces. However, towards the end of the century, a revolutionary step was taken to ensure the safety of Paris. In 1667, Gabriel Nicolas de la Reynie was appointed as the first Lieutenant General of Police of Paris. La Reynie began lighting the streets with oil lamps to clear the city of crime. Thousands of lanterns were hung in the streets. This is the real reason why Paris is called the City of Light. Let's look at the greatest gift that the Paris of the 1600s gave to the world: art and reason. During the Louis XIV era, Paris turned into the cultural sun of Europe. The French Academy was founded, and French became the common language of Europe. On stages, Molière showed the ridiculous sides of people, while Jean-Baptiste Lully enchanted the court with his operas. Even gastronomy was born as an art branch in this period. Modern champagne and sauces took shape in the Paris kitchens of this century. As Paris ended the 1600s, it was no longer that dirty and dark town of the Middle Ages. It was a massive stage reflecting the power of the Sun King, with its geometric gardens, giant domes, and rational architecture. It had also become the center of a scientific breakthrough. The sense of greatness and order you feel when walking the streets of Paris today is the legacy of the 17th century. Paris 1600 is the story of how human will tamed nature and urban chaos. This century is a theater where elegance clashes with misery, authority with rebellion. And this theater has laid the foundations of modern Europe on these stones.